Welcome, Matthew.
Hello, Ariel. It's good to be here.
I always think it's so funny when I'm podcasting with somebody and we're talking for however long before getting to know one another, and then we just start and jump into it.
And then it's welcome 15 minutes later.
Yeah. Yes. And I feel like sometimes I have the best conversations before we actually start recording.
Yeah, there's something about the brain that says, let me say all of the best things I want to say now when no one can hear them.
Yeah. We were getting into my divorce. We were talking about how you and your wife met, all of that good stuff, which maybe we'll get to in this episode as well. But I'm really excited to have you here. And as I was just disclosing, this is all kind of top of mind for me because of what I've been going through in my own life. And I know so many listeners, whether they are in relationships or single, are dealing with relational issues constantly, whether it's relationships with somebody else or the relationship with themselves, which I know you talk about a lot in your new book. So what inspired Love Life?
I think, I wrote a book 10 years ago and it did very well, and I became kind of known for that book amongst other things like my YouTube channel and my retreats and everything else I do.
And that was How to Get the Guy, right?
That was called Get the Guy.
Get the Guy, okay.
And I think that, over time, it became really apparent to me that there were deeper reasons why people were struggling to find love, including myself. And more I became passionate about exploring those and talking about those, because the original book was really about getting people to get out there and be more proactive. And, I started my career 15 years ago as a coach with a kind of simple idea. When I first started helping women in their love lives, I was noticing so many women not being very proactive in their love lives. And this was pre-dating app era. Mm-hmm. And I got to a point where I was like, I really want to help women just take more chances, because I feel like they keep ending up with the wrong people or people who don't treat them well because they're not creating enough choice. And when we don't create enough choice, we settle for something that's not great. Mm-hmm. And so I had this whole thing about the handkerchief, and, when women would say to me, I'm old fashioned, I don't make the move, I would be like, that's nonsense. Old fashioned was making the move. It was just making the other person feel like it was their idea. And I likened it to dropping the handkerchief in front of the person that you want to talk to. Mm-hmm. And that kind of turned into this whole mini movement on how women could be much more proactive than they had been led to believe, while still maintaining their power and not feeling like all of a sudden they turned into this desperate person that they didn't want to appear to be. Mm-hmm. And I was right in some ways that there was a problem with people not being nearly proactive enough in this part of their life. But I was also wrong about my assumption that when people generated more options, that they would suddenly make better choices. And I learned that over the years, over a decade of doing what I do. I literally worked with hundreds of thousands of people in my events and coaching. And I got to a point where I went, there's something else going on here, because people seem in some way to be programmed, to be wired, to be drawn towards people and situations that hurt them, that take them away from a happy, peaceful life, that take them away from the kind of love that they say they want, and keep leading them into situations that make them really, really unhappy, feel really, really unsafe, feel miserable, and often just lead to them checking out altogether, because they're like, I just can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. This is too much. It's not working for me. And so I wrote this book because I wanted people to understand that you're not broken. It is natural to find it difficult in this area. I don't care that your friend met someone when she was in college and has been married to him ever since. Mm-hmm. This is not an easy area to figure out. It's not. It's hard. And we don't have full control over it. Unlike, if we want to get in shape, we have a lot more direct control. We can change our diet. We can go to the gym, we can train, and we'll see changes in our body. We may not get our body exactly the way we want, but we will see changes. You could go on a date every night for the next 6 months and not find love. Mm-hmm. And so we feel very out of control in this area, and many of us have been very unlucky in this area. And that shouldn't be something that we constantly punish ourselves for, or tell ourselves that we're in some way deficient or broken for not having the love life we want at this stage of our life. But what I also wrote this book to address is, what are some of the ways that we might be getting in our own way, that if we were more aware of them, we could start to take a fresh approach to our love life that might finally bring us the kind of love that we have been looking for. Mm-hmm. And also hopefully to bring people a bit more enjoyment along the way, because life is, I absolutely want to expedite the process of people finding the love they want, but I also want them to be happier on the way there. Mm-hmm. So that they're not feeling like life doesn't start until I find this, which is why I said, the book's called Love Life, but I subtitled it How to Raise Your Standards, Find Your Person, and Live Happily No Matter What. Mm-hmm. Because we can't wait to be happy. We have to find a sense of happiness and peace today. Mm-hmm. And so that's the big thesis about why I wrote the book. And in the book, I get into all of the details of how we might be going wrong at this point. Mm-hmm.
I would love to talk about all those ways that we might be going wrong at this point, but there are a lot of things there that you said that I would love to unpack a little bit. And just this idea of choosing the wrong partner and choosing situations that hurt us. What did you find when you were kind of delving into that topic? Because I think a lot of us learn that really it goes back to childhood, right? Like developmental psychology or attachment theory, and that we're all just subconsciously seeking out to recreate the patterns and the relationships that we had when we were, infants and children, even if those were not healthy. And then they just kind of leave it at that. Is that one component of it? Or what is your theory about why we continually kind of seek out these patterns? So
it's for sure, it's a huge part of it, and a deep part of it, and one of the hardest things to change. Yeah. What you're referring to is this, it really is what we know, right? Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that in many ways. It is we gravitate towards what is familiar to us. Mm-hmm. And we don't know necessarily why it's familiar. We haven't necessarily done that excavation into our past to understand what's familiar about this, but there's something that is familiar about it that we're driving towards. Our body recognizes it. Our nervous system recognizes it. We can recognize someone's push-pull, never know where I stand with them, never quite feel safe, as love. Mm-hmm. That feels somehow energizing. It feels like passion. It feels like romance, at least what I know to be romance and passion. And if I find something that's calmer, it might feel strange. It might feel disconcerting. It might feel boring, because it's just not what I've come to appreciate as love. Other people, it's, love is what you have to work for. You have to earn love. You have to go out of your way to get love. It doesn't come easy. It's not peaceful. You have to do a lot. You have to perform to get love. And so, we all have our relationship with what love is, and our nervous system is addicted to, if you grow up in a life of stress, you can recreate stress all your life, because that's what you're wired for. Mm-hmm. Your nervous system knows chaos. And a lot of us say, well, I thrive when I'm in chaos. I thrive when I'm in stress. And it's what we're really saying is, this isn't what makes me happy, but it's just very, very familiar to me. And so we look for ways to replicate that. But and I think it's really important for people, because it's very common when we keep choosing people who are bad for us, or who make us unhappy, or who treat us poorly. It's very common for people nowadays just to say, well, you don't love yourself, or that's a lack of self-worth. And they're not wrong, but it's a bit reductive, because I use the example in the book of a dolphin that grows up in captivity and has to jump through hoops to get fish from people. If you release that dolphin into the ocean and it doesn't know how to find food and it swims up to boats in the ocean, you wouldn't say that dolphin has a self-worth problem.
Right.
You'd say that this dolphin is doing what it knows.
Yeah.
What it learned in the tank. And we all have our tank. Every single one of us. So what did we learn in the tank? That's what we're replicating, many of us, in adult life. The deduction that many of us have made is what I've gotten so far must be what I'm worth. That must be my level in life. And any more than that makes us feel uncomfortable. By the way, often less than that also makes us feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But we find our level at that comfort zone where our brain has told us this is your worth. And so when we start, a friend of mine, she found herself with a nice guy who treated her very well after having been in a relationship with someone who treated her very, very poorly. And she said to her mum one day, her mum said, "How's it going?" And she said, "It's so weird. He's so nice to me." And her mum said, "That's how it's supposed to be." But for her, it was so unfamiliar and it felt uncomfortable to her to be getting more. She was getting more, but it felt uncomfortable to her to be getting more. So that's what we have to learn to become comfortable with, is a new set level. And that's very, very hard for most of us. We shouldn't underestimate how hard it is to get comfortable with more, or to get comfortable with love that doesn't come with a catch, which is what so many people are comfortable with, is, well, I can get love, but as long as it comes with a lot of pain or suffering, but to ask for someone this wonderful without being treated like crap behind the scenes, or without, their intermittent outbursts, or without them betraying me, that would be asking too much. So it's hard. It's hard to get comfortable with more.
It's interesting. I'm drawing a lot of parallels between this scenario and addiction and recovery. I've been in recovery for 10 years. And something that's so common with people, especially in early recovery, is that suddenly their life isn't tumultuous, and marked with all this drama and overstimulation. And so many people don't know what to do with that feeling of what I would call serenity. But a lot of people kind of interpret that as boredom, and people go back to their old lifestyle. And I think that, similarly, if you've been experiencing love in one way, or relationships one way since you've been a child, maybe, and then you recreate that in your romantic relationships, and your self-worth and everything is wrapped up in that, and you're used to that, stimulation and nervous system activation and stress and all of that, when that goes away, in a same way as an addict losing their drug of choice, that feeling can be so uncomfortable that you would just go back to the familiar, to your point.
Yeah, because it's a great point, because you're training yourself to not just get used to a new feeling, but to value it.
Yeah.
Right? If you take someone who's dealing with drug addiction, and on the day that they stop using, you sit them in front of a sunset and say, "Appreciate this sunset." Like, this is not the day that they're going to...
Not the day.
That they're going to look at a sunset and go, "How magnificent.
Yeah.
How awe-inspiring. I feel so connected to nature right now.
Yeah.
I feel so connected to myself. I feel so present. This is, my God, what a beautiful thing." That's not the day you're going to appreciate that. The day that you give up drugs and the days following that are literally just retraining, going through withdrawal and then retraining your nervous system. And that is it may take a lot of time to get to a point where you can say, "Oh my God, sunset's unbelievable." But it will never be a sun. It's also learning that you can't, it's not about trying to mimic the feeling that you got in the old paradigm with the feeling that you're getting from a more healthy source, because they'll never be the same thing. A sunset will never be a crazy high that you get from a drug. It's not going to be that. So if we're waiting for the time where a sunset's going to feel like that, we're going to be waiting a very long time, and we might end up saying, well, sunsets don't work. It's starting to see the new experience as inherently valuable, but in a different way. And that can lead us into some other situations where it's not, we got the feeling a different way. It's that we're no longer chasing that feeling, and we're valuing something that at first may seem more subtle, but once you connect to it, you realize is profoundly more valuable than the old thing.
So there's a lot of brain rewiring, right, that we have to do when we kind of enter upon this work. So what are some of the first steps that somebody can take when they are wanting to change? Because you said like the fundamental relationship is the relationship we have with ourselves. And you hear everybody say like, oh, you just have to love yourself and then you can love another person, or love yourself and be whole, and then you'll attract the right person. But like, I think it sounds good. What does that look like in practice?
Well, I think so much of the kind of advice out there on self-love these days is really, really unhelpful and misleading. And it has good intentions, but I just think that it leaves people not knowing what to do with it. We're told ad nauseum, self-love is the answer. And then ask anyone, what does it actually look like? And you get some version of bubble bath and candles. And I have never been able to connect with any of that. I also found it difficult inherently to connect with the kind of rhetoric around self-love that always seemed to revolve around some version of connecting to how special I am and how unique I am, and I don't know about anyone else. For me, in my low points, I'm not feeling particularly special or unique or wonderful. And like that was not a route to self-love for me. And by the way, in my lowest moments is when I needed self-love the most. But that was exactly the time where I was like, I can't connect to feeling special and amazing right now. So I would ask audiences, because I would want to play out with them the internal dialogue around self-love so that they could start to see where they were getting tripped up. So I would say to audiences in my events, on my retreat, why should you love yourself? And people would pause and they wouldn't initially have a good answer. And by the way, everyone, if I said, is it important to love yourself? Everyone would say yes. But then I said, okay, so why should you love yourself? Everyone got stumped. Then someone would say, well, we should love ourselves because we're special. And I said, but what makes you special? And then people would be stumped again. And they'd say, well, it's because I'm kind, or I'm good to people, or I'm loving, or I'm this, or I'm that. And I'm like, that sounds a lot to me like grading yourself. What happens on the days where you're not those things? Because none of us are those things all the time. So when you're not those things, are you not deserving of love? And then people would be like, And they'd say, people would keep coming up with vague answers like that, because we deserve it. And I'd say, well, doesn't everyone deserve it? And they go, yeah. And I'd say, well, then if everyone deserves it, it doesn't really feel like this whole I'm special rhetoric seems to fall down, because it just feels like, well, we're all the same. So I would get to a point where I would realize, oh, this is where people are getting tripped up. We have to have a different way of thinking about self-love. It needs a rebrand. And I would realize that we're trying to love ourselves almost via the romantic model of love, the way we love other people. We fall in love because someone is interesting and charismatic and great to be around and all of these things. And so now we fall in love with them. But if you think about what the opposite of that is, there's a phrase that we all know. It's familiarity breeds contempt. And it's why so many long-term relationships fail. It's because we get so familiar with someone that we take them for granted. We no longer appreciate what's amazing about them. We're too close to them. We develop contempt. And then we go out in search for someone more mysterious again so that we can get that feeling of falling in love all over again. Well, if familiarity breeds contempt, who would we have more contempt for than ourselves, than the person we have spent every waking moment with since the day we were born? There's almost nothing, there's no room left for anything but contempt. I take myself for granted, all the things that are good about me, I'm bored with, all of my mistakes I'm more aware of than anyone else in the world. So it's really hard to love ourselves through the romantic model. And I think that's why so many of us have struggled with self-love for so long. So then you have to ask, what would be a different model for loving ourselves that doesn't follow the romantic model? Because that's broken for self-love. I started looking around at places where a different model was applied. So I look at the parent-child relationship. If you ask a parent, why do you love your child? Almost never does a parent say, well, last week they got an A in math and they did a really cute thing the other day, and they don't do that. If you say to a parent, why do you love your child? They'll look at you with a strange look and be like, what are you talking about? Because they're my child. Because he's my son, because she's my daughter, because they're mine. What are you talking about? That left a giant clue for me, because I started to realize that the essence of self-love isn't about finding reasons to love yourself. You only need one. And it's the most basic, fundamental reason of all. That of 8 million people on this earth, you are the only one who's responsible for the human that is you. It's like at birth, you were given a human. Here's your human. And okay, for the first 16 to 18 years of our life, someone's job was to keep us alive. They may or may not have done a good job of that, but it was someone else's job. And then when we came of age, though probably no one ever said it to us, the reality is, hey, in case you didn't know, this human is yours. You're responsible for this human. Your job is to take care of this human now. You have custody, full custody of this human. And because we never got told that, when we moved on from our parents taking care of us or whatever, we started looking for other people to do it. Who's going to make me feel loved now? Who's going to make me feel enough now? Who could I fall in love with so that they'll be there for me emotionally, so that they'll take care of me, so that they'll make me feel enough? Who are the friends I can go to help? But no one ever told us, hey, you have one job. In this whole life, you have one job, and it is to take care of this human. Make this human as happy as you can possibly make them. When you realize that, it changes the entire way that we look at self-love. Because you realize, I don't need to think I'm awesome. I don't need to think I'm special. I don't need to think, I don't need to compare myself to other people and think that I match up. I don't need any of that. I only need to know that I have one job in this world, and that is to take care of this human. And when you think like that, comparison with other people makes no sense anymore. Because you just go, I just have to parent this human. I can't exchange this human for another human. So there's no point thinking, well, but they have this and they're better looking and they're taller and they're skinnier and it's irrelevant. You can't exchange your human. You just have one human and one job. Give that human the best life you can possibly give them. What that does is it turns loving ourselves from the noun, that feeling of love, to a verb, to love. Our job is to love ourselves as an approach. And then when you realize that, you realize, oh, loving myself can start today, because I've been telling myself, how do I love myself? I don't even like myself. You don't need to like yourself in order to love yourself. Liking yourself can come later. And by the way, in the parent-child relationship, it often does. The child as they get older, realizes all the things the parent did for them.
Mm-hmm.
But often the fruits of that relationship, many of them, don't come until that child is an adult. It's the same with ourselves. We don't have to like ourselves right now. We don't have to like the position we've got ourselves into in life, the mistakes we've made, the things we feel regret over, the things we feel guilty for. You don't have to feel love for yourself. You have to love yourself as a verb, as a job. And that changes everything. So the next question is, what would loving this human look like? You asked that question. Okay, if we're trying to rewire ourselves, what does loving myself in that context actually look like? Well, the starting question is, what does this human need? What would give them the best shot at happiness, at peace, at improving their life? And often that starts with, well, what hasn't worked? What kinds of people have we been giving time to? Who have I allowed this human to be around year after year after year? Who have I let get close to that human that should never have got close to that human?
Yep.
And how will I stop that from ever happening again? And I have a whole chapter in the book called How to Rewire Your Brain, wherein, a series of different steps, I show people what that looks like. But the first step is you make change necessary by saying, what is it I can never do again? You don't need self-belief for that. Self-belief is built from doing things that build confidence. You take an action, you do something difficult, and now you believe in yourself a little more because you've done it before. But you don't need self-belief to stop doing something that just creates hell for you. You just need to learn, no one needs confidence to not put their hand in a flame. We just don't put our hand in the flame because it burns. Well, what's the flame in your life that you just know, I can never stick my hand in that flame again? That is all you need. It's the necessity you need. When I say make change necessary, it's not, I don't start how to rewire your brain by saying, believe you can have more. It's make change necessary. What's the thing you can never do again because of how much pain it's caused you in the past? If you've been with people who you've been really attracted to, or they've been very charismatic, but they've not been loyal, they've not cared about your feelings, they've gaslit you, they're incapable of saying sorry, they are not, there's no empathy in the way they treat you, they don't even fully commit to a relationship with you, they keep telling you they're not ready. What is the thing that in the last relationship you were in that caused you immense pain, or the relationship you keep repeating, what's the thing that made you miserable in that relationship because it was missing? Whether it was decency, loyalty, being seen by someone, feeling safe with someone. When you know what that is, what the big realization you can have is, oh, if that thing's missing, it doesn't matter how amazing I think someone is. I'm miserable. I can never be happy. So from now on, no matter how amazing I think someone is, if I don't have that basic thing, that basic value, that basic trait, or a basic, yes, I want to be in a relationship with you, it's irrelevant how awesome I think they are, or how sexy, or how attractive, or how charismatic I think they are. That's making change necessary. And we can go through the other steps if you want. I want to give you a chance to jump in, but that's the beginning of it, is making it necessary. And again, that's much easier to do when you are actively loving yourself, because you realize, it's my job to give this human a better life. It's been my job so far. I might have been sleeping on it, but it's been my job this whole time. I always say to myself, if I've let something happen in my life that I shouldn't have, or I say, Matthew, you had one job.
Yeah.
Where have you been?
Yeah.
And that wakes me up, because I'm like, oh yeah, I can never let that happen again. That's making change necessary.
such a huge paradigm shift there. And as you were talking, I was thinking of Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle. I don't know. I never know how to pronounce it.
Depending on the day I'm speaking, I use a different one.
Interchangeably. But he talks, about separating the I and myself. Like they're two different things. His revelation that he had when he said, I am going to kill myself. And then not to get dark, but he went, wait, these are two different things. And when you're talking about, caring for this human, those are two different things. There's kind of these two different parts of us, even though it's the same. That was just one thought that came up. But yeah, when you put it that way, kind of it reframes self-love completely. Because to your point, if you're listing off qualities or attributes, what about on those days that you don't have those? You don't love yourself, or you don't deserve love, or you're not worthy of love? How does this apply to loving another person? I mean, when we are looking for a partner, are we supposed to love them in that same way? Or I feel like it always gets conditional when it's somebody else, right? When it's unconditional with ourselves.
The part that makes it conditional is when loving that human in another person is at odds your responsibilities to take care of the human that it is truly your job to take care of. You can love someone in ways that feel unconditional, where you go, I would do anything for this person, and I love their soul, I love their essence, my love for them goes so much deeper than anything they're good at or anything they bring to the table, or any of those things that they worry if they stop doing those things they wouldn't be enough. I can love them more deeply than all of those things. But the point where it becomes conditional is if loving you in the way that I am today makes it impossible for me to do my job of loving this human who's literally, like I said, that's my one job I must do. Whatever other jobs I do in this world, the one thing I must do is take care of this human. If we go to the extreme and you're like, you're in love with a narcissist who invalidates you at every turn, gaslights you, distorts your entire reality, separates you from yourself, just in every way, your life with them is miserable, pathologically lies to you, creates chaos in your life. Well, you can no longer say you're doing your job by being with that person, because you may have the dangerous kind of empathy that just has no limits, where you keep excusing the things they're doing. Maybe you know their history and it makes you empathize with them and take pity on them, and that's why they are the way they are, and they need my love, they need my support. But if that means abandoning yourself and the job that you have to do with yourself, then loving them has gone too far.
When I did a solo episode recently about the end of my relationship, I got so much feedback from people who are in relationships and they don't know whether they should stay or leave. And I talked a lot about how my relationship wasn't quote unquote bad. And one of the questions that I got from a listener was, how do you leave, or how do you know when to leave a relationship if it's not quote unquote bad and it would actually look really good to other people? And I know there's so much ego and identity wrapped up in that. And for me, I just felt like you just always know. I think, or at least I always knew. I knew deep down, but it was whether or not I was going to listen to that. Is that kind of the gauge? Am I sacrificing loving myself by loving this person? Or
I think firstly, it's always questionable for anyone else to tell you what bad is for you.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of projection that happens in that. If someone was in a very abusive relationship and there's no abuse in your relationship, you're just in a place where, let's say, you just truly do not feel seen and understood by your partner. You feel like you're just talking different languages, and that person doesn't really know who you are. Doesn't get you. Maybe, you to be with them is to feel alone, because in conversation you have absolutely nothing in common. You don't understand the way each other see the world. There may not be any abuse in the relationship. So to someone who's suffered abuse, they may look at your relationship and go, you're giving away a good thing. What I would give to be in a relationship where someone wasn't abusive and they treated me well and blah, 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 and they worked hard and they were responsible.
Yeah.
But their bad is very focused on abuse, and your bad is focused on the fact that you're in a relationship where you feel completely alone and you feel like, I haven't found someone who really gets me. And who's to say that's not bad? If you spend your whole life with someone like that, and that's the person you're going to spend the most time with by definition, you're going to have an incredibly lonely existence. That is bad for you. I'm not saying you, because I don't know your situation.
No,
but
I can identify.
Right. That's
a slow eating
misery.
away at
it's
your
a chronic pain.
soul. Yeah.
And so I think we all have to ask ourselves, what's really important to me? Because maybe there was a time in my life where I over-indexed on charisma, or, over-indexed on looks or height or whatever, like things that I look back on now and I'm like, God, that's not where it's at. But man, can I be unhappy when I'm with someone who doesn't get me? And so you realize, next time around, that's got to be the most important thing in the world to me. The fact that they don't look exactly how I thought someone would look, or that they, are shorter, or that they're this or they're that. Honestly, for anyone, it could be you let go of certain things that you find are less important.
Yes.
But you gravitate towards the things that you realize I can't live without. And that's where it goes back to the self-love is, what, if I stay in this relationship, what am I depriving myself of that is essentially starving me of if my basic core need is for safety at the very baseline of, if you take like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the first fundamental thing is physiological needs. Yes, I need a roof over my head. Yes, I need to feel like my body's not threatened every day or whatever. But once you're meeting those needs, then you get to higher level needs. And at a certain point, if you're in a relationship where you don't feel understood, then one of your higher level needs isn't being met. And yes, that will be a problem. Yeah. Can you tolerate that problem over a lifetime is the big question, is whether, shouldn't I leave? Can I tolerate the absence of this thing over a lifetime? Is it the kind of thing that will get better? Can it get better? Have I done what I can to try to improve it? And I think anyone who's truly given it their best shot to try to improve that thing and felt like it's just not happening. No one should spend a lifetime in a unhappy relationship simply because it's not as bad as someone else's bad relationship.
Well, I think there's also a lot of fear and, kind of a scarcity mindset that a lot of us probably have, especially given the landscape of dating now. It has changed so much, to your point earlier. And nightmare stories from single friends and nightmare stories of the dating apps and everything. And, I can say for myself, that would start to creep in and I would go, well, this isn't bad. Okay, so yeah, I feel a little lonely sometimes and maybe I don't feel seen, but look at all this that I do have. And this is a good person. And what if I don't find, and then it just spirals. And that fear, I know this is so common, and I'm sure you know it so well too, that will keep somebody in a relationship for a long time.
Yes. And it does.
Yeah.
People go to their grave with that.
Yeah. Which is heartbreaking.
It's at a certain point. Look, when we're afraid, we give ourselves false dichotomies. I either stay here and I'm unhappy, or I leave and I'm in this crazy wild west of bad dating behavior that I now have to deal with. And there's like 1,000 shades of...
Or I'm alone forever.
Or I'm alone forever. And you know, we all have a tendency to do that. We catastrophize and we look at the worst possible scenarios and we don't see all of the different... If you start slicing it between your current situation and the worst possible scenario, there's 1,000 in-betweens. And life is not so simple. Life is not so black and white. Yes, you're back into the dating market and you might have a few bad experiences. You can also control that to some extent. You can turn off the tap when you want to turn off the tap. You can walk away when you get a bad experience, where a younger you might not have. You don't have to, your friend who got locked into a bad experience for 2 years, you might spot that on week 3 and go, I'm not going to spend 2 years in this bad experience. You know, a lot of the reasons people burn out in dating is because they give too much energy to something they already know is bad or not going to be fruitful with someone who doesn't deserve it. And that they use up all their bandwidth on that. But if you protect your energy and you give it only where you see that it's rewarded or only where you see that it's with the right kinds of human beings, then dating's going to be a different experience for you than a lot of those horror stories that you see out there. Because in a lot, not in all, but in a lot of cases, the horror stories unfold the way they do because there were things that we hadn't learned to act on earlier. There are things we chose to ignore or didn't see the signs of. And when we're more in tune with what we want, it's very hard for someone. They may take us down the wrong road for a little bit until we realize it's very hard for someone to take us too far down that road before we sense the incongruencies of what's going on or what they're telling us versus what they're doing and so on.
I totally agree with that. And I feel like if you are in a situation or a relationship and you do choose to leave, despite the fear, despite the anxiety, uncertainty, all of that, I'll just speak for myself. Like, I'm so clear on what I want and what I don't want and what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with. And, you know, when I entered into my last relationship 8 years ago, I wanted different things than I want now for so many different reasons. And I was okay with certain things back then that, you know, I wouldn't be okay with now. And the things that I thought that I wanted then are not the things that I want now.
And that's there's so much power in that.
Yeah.
And I think that as we get older and hopefully as we get more attuned to what we want, there's this bittersweet thing where I think sometimes if we haven't met someone by a certain point, we can look at, you know, even if I met someone today, I wouldn't have 10 years of history with them. And that makes me sad. You know, I would be starting again today. But the more attuned we get to what we want, the more we catch up to each other more quickly. Because I know what I want, you know what you want. We have a better sense of people. We sense the tender spots in each other. Because when you've been through it in life, and when you've lived, whatever that means for you, there's 1,000 different ways to have, you know, experienced life. But when you meet someone who has been through it on some level too, you see each other. It's unmistakable. You talk and you sense their life, not just in what they say, but in what they don't say, or in how measured they are in what they say, or the nuance and the energy they bring. You sense this is someone else who gets it. And if they get it, then they kind of get me. And so what might have taken you 5 years to arrive at as a younger version of yourself, you arrive at much quicker with someone as two people who are coming to the table with a different level of knowledge and experience and wisdom and scars. And I think there's something very, very beautiful in that. What we have to do, part of leaving a relationship that's wrong is learning to trust ourselves, which may not be something we have learned to do in the past, or that relationship may have made us not trust ourselves. Part of the leap is jumping into unknown territory where we will have to learn to trust ourselves as we go. We will have to learn that we can trust ourselves in a room alone for a weekend to get through it on the go. Because there won't be a choice. We will have to learn to trust our judgment a little more this time around as we go. But the more you do learn to trust yourself, I really believe this, the less you will run into the kinds of stories that people talk about when they're dating. Because you trust yourself enough to be happy. And the last chapter of this book is called Happy Enough, because I don't think you have to be happy. I think you have to be happy enough. Yeah. But if you learn how to be happy enough on your own, then if you see things you don't like, you can say no. You can walk away, because you don't need that person anymore. You can wait, and you can even admit to yourself that I'd probably be happier if I found the love of my life. That's okay. You don't need to pretend that that's not true. You just have to know that you can be happy enough without that person to say no to the wrong thing. So it's learning to trust ourselves again, which is a hard thing. If you don't trust yourself, you're afraid to go out there and date, because you're afraid of what will happen to you if you get attached to the wrong person. And if you do, that you're not going to be strong enough to walk away. And now you're going to be a whole new cycle of pain.
Yep. Amazing. Well, I think that's such an encouraging note to end on. And I totally agree with you, that last piece that you were saying, getting somewhere more quickly with somebody at this stage in your life, when you do have that life experience and wisdom and you know yourself better. I feel like you can have a connection with somebody in a couple of months that you wouldn't have with somebody in years, before you learn that about yourself. So I think that's it's a hopeful message, and probably provides a lot of encouragement for any of my listeners who are also single or in unhappy relationships or whatever their circumstances are. So thank you for sharing that. And I think the book is amazing, and tell everybody where they can find the book and find you.
Well, thank you for having me on first, Ariel. I really appreciate it, and exposing this book to your audience. The book is called Love Life: How to Raise Your Standards, Find Your Person, and Live Happily No Matter What. Very proud of it. I've been working on it for many years now, and I really think it's going to help a lot of people. And for anyone out there who wants to find love, this book is for you. If it's felt really hard, I promise you this is going to help you look at things differently. But it's also, there's chapters in there about how to recover from heartbreak. There's a chapter on the question of having a child. If you are afraid because you want a child, but you feel like time is running out, there's an entire chapter in there for you to read that would be worth getting the book alone just to read that chapter. There's chapters on how to rewire ourselves for success in love, how to build confidence. It's a very, very complete book in many ways. And if people go to lovelifebook.com, they'll be able to get a copy. But also, I'm doing a live event on the 4th of May, which is, there's no way to buy a ticket to this event. Your book is your ticket. So it's amazing. A virtual event. No matter where you are in the world, you'll be able to watch this event from home. But the event is called Find Your Person, and it's designed to be this perfect pairing with the book, where you read the book. But then if you really have that goal of finding your person this year, then this is going to help set you up with a plan to do that. And if you go to lovelifebook.com, you can still buy the book through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you want to buy it. But if you come to lovelifebook.com, there's a place there where you can enter the receipt to get your ticket to May 4th and join us for the Find Your Person event. So
amazing. Yeah. I'm going to be reading it. I'm going to find my person.
That's what I love about it as well, is whatever stage you're in, even if you're right now, you're grieving, or even if you're just trying to find your feet again after a massive change in circumstances, I promise you, this book meets you at whatever stage you're at. There's a chapter called How to Leave When You Can't Seem to Leave, which is for anyone who's in a relationship right now and trying to figure out how they can get the strength to leave if it's not right for them. It'll help you figure out if it's not right too. So it meets you where you're at. But I'm so excited for people to read. I haven't been this passionate. I don't think I've ever been this passionate about something I've created, and I think it's the most meaningful work I've ever done. So I just can't wait for people to read it.
Well, you can definitely tell in conversation with you and hearing you talk about it that this really comes from your heart and that you are really passionate about this.
Thank you. I started writing this book as a single person. That's the crazy part. I was single and heartbroken, and I finished editing the book on my honeymoon, which it wasn't okay. But we did. We were away for a month for our honeymoon. But,
a month.
So I feel like I had an excuse. But no, I've every stage of pain in my own love life, you'll see in these pages. This is not a story of a married person writing a book on love. It's me going through every stage of this for myself, and also the hard. For sure. So yeah, thank you for having me, Ariel.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming.